In this video, I'm going to show you how to make realistic looking and more importantly, good looking tanks in Minecraft. This video is not meant to be a tutorial, but more of a guide. And what I mean by that is I do not intend you to follow me exactly, but instead use my demonstration to learn and take away techniques and knowledge that will help you with building any tank instead of just what I'm showing. So the first step is to, of course, just pick which tank you want to make. I'm going with the Leclerc MBT, just because it has some interesting shaping on the hull and turret. So I'm going to be using for demonstration. And the second thing we want to do is look up the dimensions so we can have something to reference off of. And if it doesn't show up right here, usually Wikipedia will have a section right here for the hull dimensions. You're going to want to look for the length without the gun. Sometimes it will tell you with the gun, and you can get a little bit confused on that and end up making your tank way too long. So just be sure. It should be right around 7 for newer MBTs and less than that for some older tanks. In any case, most of the time you're going to want to do a 2-to-1 scale build. That is generally the kind of accepted scale for Minecraft tanks. You can do 1.5-to-1, but it looks a little small. You might have a tough time fitting all the internals in. You can do 3-to-1, but again, it'll just look a little big compared to everything else. And 2-to-1 is generally a good kind of middle of the road. So 6.88 times 2 is about, what is that, like 13.6. And the width, 3.6 times 2, is going to be just over 7. So we'll just call it 7 blocks wide plus some side skirts should get us there. Now, in the event that your tank has an even number width, such as we can see here the T34 tank dimensions, which should be about 3 blocks wide, 3 meters rather, multiplied by 2, that will give you a hull width of 6 meters. And of course, you can't center your turret on a 2-block center, but there are ways around that we will discuss later in the video. Now, to start off by actually building, we're going to first of all just take some blocks and outline the size that we want, that we just found. I'm also going to grab a 1 of symmetry. This will make things a lot easier for us. So it is 7 blocks wide, so we'll do 1, 3, 5, 7 blocks. And then we'll go, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And it's actually 13 and a half, but we'll have some stuff hanging off, so we will be right there. Next, I want to do where the tracks are going to go. So this is kind of the lower section of the hull here. And if we just look at the Leclerc, we can see that it has some pretty decently sized road wheels. So these look to be about medium track size, although it's not uncommon to see tanks where you will want to use smaller tracks. So we're just going to throw these in for now. We will worry about them a little bit later. For now, just get them in here, and yeah. This is where I would advise taking a step back and actually planning out what the shape of your hull is going to look like. So I'm in Photoshop here, but obviously you can use any art program you want, or just do this in your head. I don't usually draw it out like this, I just do it in my head. But basically what we're doing is just matching the IRL tank to the Minecraft block grid system, so we can know how tall everything should be at any given point, and how we're going to build that. So we know that the tracks are about here, and then we'll say that, just for convenience, this is going to be 1 block, this will be a bit of a slope, and this will be a little bit taller than 1 block back here. Also note that on most tanks, the section above the track is going to be a little bit taller. Here on the Leclerc, it's actually flush with the rest of the hull, as you can see. But also note the shape of the side skirts and the slope and shape of the lower front plate. In any case, we're basically just eyeballing here. I'm going to call this section about 3.5 blocks. And then we'll call this back section maybe 4 blocks or so. We can always come back and, of course, change it if we need to. Now, this lower front plate is actually not sloped all that much. I think this is actually a cover of some kind, and the actual hull is a little bit more slope perhaps, but we're just going to roll with this, what we can actually see here. So we're actually not going to slope this with layers. I have plans for this lower front plate that I will be showing you. Back in game here, we're going to get right into shaping. So I'm just going to say this is the front of the tank. It doesn't matter, of course. You can pick any side you want. I'm going to start off with a slab height on the front. If you go under a slab, then the front of your, or rather the top of your track can show through, and that's not what you want. So I usually advise going at least a slab at the very front, although you can go under that if you want to, if it is really necessary. Now, if we just do a normal 1 layer per half block slope here, we're actually going to end up ending the slope a little bit early. I said we were going to go for 3.5 blocks. This is only 3 blocks. Actually, it's 2.5 blocks. So what we're going to do is do maybe a 14. Actually, we'll do a 12 here maybe, and then we can have this go all the way up, and then do something like that, and then that will kind of smooth out our slope just a little bit. It will do like a 10 here, and that looks pretty good actually. All you're doing at this stage is taking your plan for how everything is sloped and shaped and just following it. Obviously it doesn't matter all too much, you can go back and change it always. Now, steep slopes, such as the lower front plate as we saw there, are kind of hard to do, because even if you try to do them with layers, it just ends up looking a bit strange. This doesn't look like a steep curve or a steep slope like this. It just looks like it comes down and then has a fairly sharp angle here. So instead what we're going to do is just use a 12 or maybe a 14 if you wanted. You can also do a slice here on the front. And then when combined with this top part, this will kind of give you the look of having a steep slope on the lower front plate here. I actually forgot we need to decide how tall this section is going to be. Just looking at it, it's actually not that much higher. The engine deck is not that much higher than the rest of the hull. So it's going to be probably either a slab or more likely just a 6 out of 16 6 pixels up here. So we will do that right now. So we'll go ahead and put in our 6 out of 16s. And then we will make some room for our half layers like that. That looks pretty darn good. Could maybe push it back one. And I think I will do just that. So we're going to do a 2 here into a 3. And just a 1 like this. Now for these kind of track flaps or skirts, you can see here, it kind of comes out a little bit. But the top part is still flush with the edge of the top of the hull, and then it comes basically straight down and then just has a little overhang right here. So we said that the top is flush with the top of the hull, so we're just going to do a 3 to match, and we'll do maybe another 3 or maybe a 4. Go with 3 I think here, and that just looks pretty good. Really, you don't have to worry about this too much. These little details are frankly not all that important, especially just if it's just like a quarter of a skirt here. You know, nobody's really looking at it all too much. You should be focusing more so on the major sculpting of the hull, the shape rather, of the hull and turret, because that is where most of the attention is going to be. Even if you have all the little details right, if your shaping's wrong, the whole thing's going to look wrong, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Now moving on to the side skirts, we can see on the Leclerc, it pretty much just goes, just follows the shape of the hull, and then goes all the way down. Although we are going to want to leave some space. There's a little angle here. I'll clean this up so you can see better. But it has a little angle on the front, just a tiny little bit, and it also has a cutout for the rear sprocket. For side skirt blocks, you have a few options here. You have the panel, the headstock, and then the full panel, is the half panel rather. All of these are 3 pixels wide, so they will join together perfectly. You can also do a little slice if you need something even smaller, but if you do that, then it's going to be 1 pixel wider than the panels, and so that can look a little bit strange, but if you just use it sparingly, you should be fine. So to get that tiny little cutout on the front sprocket here, we can either go like this, or we can do like this. I think I'm going to do like this, because this kind of suggests a sort of angle here, and then we'll just flush in the rest with our headstocks and panels. Note that the headstock is 12 pixels tall, so against this other 12x16, it will match up perfectly, so that is great. Never go over with your side skirts rather, because then you'll get this little lip here. This looks much worse than even just go under by a little bit. And that is pretty much the hull done. There is not a lot to it. Most of the time it is a rectangle with a cutout for the front plate, and sometimes a raised engine deck, but a lot of the time it doesn't even have that, so it ends up being fairly simple. Now let's move on to the turret, and this is where it's really easy to get things wrong. But basically all we're doing here is just simplifying it down into some more buildable shapes that we can actually construct in Minecraft. So we have an angled panel here. You can see it's at about a 45-degree angle with this flat. On this side we have a kind of quarter circle shape which goes around. On these sides it's pretty much just flat here with a nice sharp corner that we can easily do on this side as well. And let's actually go ahead and create this first, and then we can figure out all of this on the top of the turret afterwards. But in order to do that, we first need to figure out how tall we're going to make the turret. A mistake I see a lot of people doing is making their tanks too short, and in particular the turrets. A lot of people want their tanks to be kind of slim and look cool, which is great, but if your turret is too slim, you end up looking like the Object 775. It is just too flat and it looks silly. If our hull here is about a block tall, then I would say this is about maybe 12 pixels to a block. I'm going to go with 12 pixels just to keep it a little bit lower, so we can leave this space here to go up a little bit. So this can be a full block from here to here. And then we can have stuff sticking out of the top onto that nice full block, as opposed to making this part a full block, in which case this is more than a full block. And then if we want to mount stuff up here, then it either has to be floating or sunken into the top of the turret. So you have to also think about the ergonomics kind of, and stuff like this. Also make sure you're making your turret as long as it should be. I just have pulled up a reference image here, so we can see that the turret starts just a little bit backwards of our slope, and then it ends just a little bit over our engine deck slope here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to have it end maybe back here, or more likely it'll end kind of over here-ish. So we'll just do the kind of initial shape over here, and then we'll have some stuff hanging off the back to give it just a little bit more depth. And then it will start right around here. Also, looking at this top view, we can see that the turret comes pretty much right to the edge of the hull, and even probably straight up to the edge of our blocks, and then our side skirt panels are probably what's giving it this little part of extra width on the hull. So if our barrel is here, this front, let's get rid of this also, because this turret is not symmetrical in the front. We're going to have this come up to here. Let's start with that. And then the front little lip looks to be just about half the height of the rest. So we'll go like this actually. Maybe a little bit more because it does slope up. Now for this diagonal flat spot, this will be a little bit tricky, especially given that this is only 12 tall. This is not a full block. That makes things a little bit more complicated. What I think I'm going to do is maybe do just bites, but that might look a little jagged, yeah. So I'm going to perhaps smooth this out and just do I can just do a step here actually. We'll go with a step. Could try a slice also. That looks a little bit better perhaps. No, actually go with just a step. All you're doing is just trying things at this point. I can't cover every case for every single tank, of course. So you're just going to have to try things on your own and see what looks good. I'm also going to try a slice here. But now this gives kind of the impression that this is rounded, which it is not. So I might do another. That looks... maybe... no, I don't like that. We'll just go back to this. So bites and a step for this diagonal slope there. Now on this side, if you'll remember, as a kind of quarter circle shape here. So I'm going to pretty much just do exactly what I have over here, like that. But to make this have the impression of a circular shape instead of just being sloped, I'm going to go up like this and do a panel, and that will kind of give it the circular shape that we need. In reality, this part is actually cut out, kind of, next to the gun, but there's not a lot we can do about that. We could try, like, bites, I guess, like this or something, but as long as you get the gist of the tank, it doesn't really matter what your accuracy is like, how accurate it is to the real thing. So long as it looks good and it carries the same kind of, it conveys the same shape as a real tank. It doesn't need to be perfectly accurate. I'm just going to replicate this curve on the rest of the front and right here also. And then we will sort out this corner here. We could do bites, which looks fine. I would like it to be a bit smoother though. Could try a slice like this, perhaps. Something like that. That's too tall. But like that. And this cuts in a little hard. Don't love that. We may end up just doing the bites here. I've decided that we're going to do just one bite instead of like this, just one. But I'm also going to break these blocks so that it gives more of a rounded shape. And also so this matches the rest of the side of the turret there instead of sticking out. Now let's go back to the literal drawing board and decide what we're going to do for the top of the turret. So this image isn't great, but you can see a box here of some kind. You have a elevated structure all around here. You have this shape, which can be reduced to basically just being a rectangle. You have this for the gun, which is again basically just a rectangle, elevated above everything else. And then on the other side, you just have this continued elevated, it's kind of superstructure almost. To dumb it down even more, all we're making is this. Going with a rectangular shape here, and this will go into it will widen out, be more like that, and then we can figure out all of this in just a second. Let's fill in with some full blocks here. Oh, not that. And the superstructure, as I've just decided I'm going to call it apparently, looks to be about the same height, rather elevated above everything else, about the same amount as this front lip here, maybe a little bit less. So we're going to go for a 6 or maybe a slab on the top there. Now the only other part that matches the height is this right here, this box, and then it slopes backwards onto what we're establishing is a full block starting here. So this is a full block, and all of this is just 12 out of 16. So we can almost even keep this part flat, all of this, the full block part, and then just lower this section here back down to being a 12. And we'll basically just copy that on the other side. So this will be a 12. We'll do a layer. So that will be a full block, and this part will be 12. And then the rest of the back will be a full block. And actually, again, the box we looked at earlier is just as tall. So we'll do full there. And then 12. If this right here is a full block, then this looks like it's only going to be about half a block. So we will do just that. We'll do a half layer, and then it slopes back down like that. And actually I might, no, I'll leave this as a full block all around here. And actually I would say I've made the mistake of making the turret too short. If you just look at the image, it actually looks quite a bit bulkier, quite a bit taller that I have here. So I'm just going to buff everything up by a 2 pixels. So 6s will be slabs. This 4 will be a 6. It is looking quite a bit better, but it is actually a bit short, a bit squarish. So we're going to extend the back a bit, as I mentioned earlier. So just looking, the back of the turret is pretty much just flat. It has a very slight curve back here, but we can pretty much just ignore that for the time being. Could do like a slice there. Now, when I was figuring out what to do about this section here, I noticed that you can't actually see it at all here, but there's actually a ever so slight upward slope for the entire turret, kind of like this, if I could draw it correctly. As you can see on here, flat up and then flat on the back. And so it actually comes up to the level of this part, our raised section here. The sloping up starts pretty much immediately. I think I will start it. It should start here, in fact. But then we have to deal with this funky section here. And I'd really rather just not. So I'm going to start it about a half block backwards right here. Back to the original goal of the back of the turret. In order to get that curve like this, we're going to do pretty much what we did on the lower front plate actually. And that is to have a little overhang, a big slice, and then that will give us the illusion of it being a kind of curve like this. Although it actually looks more like this back here, but that is about the best we're going to get. Now we can move on to my favorite part of making tanks, and that is the junk. And what I mean by that is literally just all the crap that is sticking up and off your turret and your hull, such as machine guns, smoke launchers, sights, illuminators, jerry cans, fuel tanks, external fuel tanks, tow cables, spare tracks, all of that stuff. Now, unfortunately, the Leclerc doesn't have all too much junk on top, so I'm just going to be making some of this up, literally. We'll start off with an easy one, and that is just hatches. Very simple. Just put a trapdoor. I do want to show a cupola design that is actually functional. This only works if the top of your tank is made with 12 or maybe a slab. But basically all we're doing here is using boards, of which multiple can be placed in one block, to make this tube kind of. Put some glass in it and throw a trapdoor on top. So now, if you have a seat here, if I can put it, then you can climb in, get in the seat, but more importantly, you will be able to use the arrow keys to move up and down in the seat. And so you can actually see out of the tank in first person. And you can also go straight off the top for even more visibility, or if you want to shoot at things, for example. So this is a great design. I really love this. But unfortunately, not all that applicable on our Leclerc here. The Leclerc doesn't usually come with an HMG. It usually just has like a ring-mounted 30 cal or even smaller than that for the commander here. But I am just going to mount a completely fictional HMG just so I can show you what that could look like. You can of course just do a functional autocannon like so. Really simple. Have it up here, or even go one lower if you want it a little bit more discreet. But if you want something that is just decorative, then what you can do is this. Place a beam to mount it on. Next, a shaft. And this is kind of the secret part, or the trick rather, is just using a metal bracket to mount it onto the beam. Or you can do a full block, whatever you want here. And then, because the shaft is the same width as an autocannon barrel, you can just place all of that, and it blends right in. It looks like your autocannon is actually mounted to the turret here. One thing the Leclerc does have is a commander sight here. And what you can do is use an APDS round. Really love that. You can also use a solid shot or an armor piercing, whatever you want. The APDS is just the cleanest shell there is, and it also has this little bit of little gap here just to give it some shape. Next up, smoke launchers. There are none visible on the Leclerc, so again, I'm just going to be making this up. Let's say they go here. Okay. Yeah, just the one was this side. We're just doing bites, and then we will put in them a metal bracket. And what this does is that the bite, of course, divides up your blocks into their separate little cells here, kind of. So when you put in a bracket, the bracket is not a full block, of course, as you can see. So it leaves even more of a gap there. So you have these separate little things, which can look like a lot of things, including smoke launchers. An alternative that I've recently been using is using an ammo rack. Just put it like this, and this gives you 8 here, or just 4 for a single bite. And this looks great. However, if your tank is facing this way, for example, then you may not even have the option to rotate the gray side. You can just do like this, but I think the yellow is ugly. So you just have to be mindful of that when you're building. Next up is jerry cans or other small gas cans. So we'll just we'll just do one here. You're just going to take a copycat slab. You can also do a 6 or a 10 out of 16. That works just fine. And you're going to take a double steel armor and rotate the right direction. So it has this nice seam down the middle for this nice texture. And then we'll just do a bite on either side, doesn't matter, of course. And then our beloved metal bracket, which we've used 3 times already, for the pour spout. You can also do a slice or even a step like that. For the ones that have the big triple carrying handle that the US used in World War II, I believe. And also you can also do other colors, of course. I like the normal red. Here, one the Leclerc actually has, and that is antennas. Very, very simple. Just take some bars or some slices, and basically just stick them any way you want, really. The one trick I have to show for this is using the shear pin, which has this kind of funny shape. So you just stick this down, and then do your bars for your antenna. Because some tanks have like a little something down here, like a wider base for the antenna. So that can look pretty good. I think I'm actually going to, I'll leave that one, and we'll do one slice back here, just like that. Let's do some chunk for the hull now. First of all, real simple, one block. That is just cage lanterns. Just a nice little touch. Next up, tow cables. More commonly on modern tanks, they're just found coiled up somewhere. Before World War II tanks especially, you'll see them laid out like this. So we're just going to do some shafts. We'll make this one longer. And use some metal brackets to attach them. And then we'll also do another cage lamp on the ends to kind of look like the tow hook that is actually there. Also, spare track links, which can be found on the turrets as well. We'll do here. So I'm just going to do a layer. We'll get our bracket in, make sure it's touching the hull or the side you want. And the reason we're doing a layer is to control exactly how tall it is, like so. You can just do a full copycat slab if you want. If you just want the full height, very simple, very easy to do. On the back of the hull, either right here or on the engine deck, you will commonly see a grill or a radiator. So you can just do panels and then andesite bars or such. Make sure if you're doing andesite bars or other kinds of bars, make sure you are using a panel. If you do something like a 4 and a 16, which is pretty much the same thickness, it will not work. As you can see, that is just one bar, and you can't rotate it either. So use a panel. Alternatively, you can use supports. I like the industrial iron supports. So just rotate them until they go the right way, and then put them in like so. Also back here you may find external fuel tanks. Just using some oil barrels here, very simple. You can also do vaults if you want, but you can dye the barrels, that's why I like them. In order to support these and hold them up, we can do bites with our good friend the metal bracket. But that gap can actually be an issue here because it's not actually touching the tank itself. So we can also do industrial iron just for a more solid option. And we can also do these support wedges, which are perfect for this. Just a tiny little wedge to kind of brace the fuel tank. That is pretty much going to do it for all of the junk for our tank. Now comes my least favorite part of making tanks, and that is the texturing and the camo. Now, when picking what colors to do for your camo, a lot of times you will just see one flat color on your tank for your reference images. Even if it is just one color, I would highly recommend you use some of the similar colors. For example, we have 3 kinds of green here. If your tank is just flat green, use all 3, make up some camo. It will look so much less boring than if you just go over the whole thing in one color. For us here today, we can see that Leclerc has this very nice multicolor. We have black, we have green, and we have a brown. Now, keep in mind, this might actually even be more important than the colors you pick, and that is the shape of the camo. And what I mean by that is how the colors are arranged. We can see here, pretty simple. We have big stripes or patches of each color, like so. On some tanks, such as World War II German tanks, we can see they have this very pronounced stripy pattern, as you can see here. One of the most interesting designs I've seen that I really had to pay attention to while making is the K1. You see here, it is this kind of green base, you could call it. I'm just going to say the base is green. And then on top of that, we have a tan or brown, big patches. But then within that, we have stripes, little swirls of a lighter tan. And then only attached to the tan do we see black. There is no free-floating black here, just in the middle of the green by itself. All of the black is attached to usually the lighter tan. You can see right here, there's a bit not attached to lighter tan. But the light tan is always in swirls, the darker tan is always in big patches, and the black is always attached to the tan. So you have to pay attention to these kinds of things when you're deciding how to make your camo. For me, I'm going with this kind of mid, slightly more saturated green. We'll go with the kind of the lighter of the blacks, and then we'll do a little more brown here. So for us, very simple, just big blotches of each color. So we're going to start off with the brown. Keep in mind how much of each color you're using. For example, I have 3 colors here, of course. So I want each color to take up about 1/3 of the space. If I'm doing this tank in half brown, then each of these are only going to get about 1/4 of the space, as opposed to the 1/3 they should be getting. An easy kind of way to measure in your head is to just come up with sections. So if we're just looking at this top engine deck part, half of this should be green and half of this should be black. So we'll do about half in any of these sections you look. So here's 2, here's 4, and about 4 there, and then here's like 3.5 blocks, and here's like 4 blocks. So that is keeping it pretty balanced. Also keep in mind how prominent your color is going to be. The brown is kind of an ugly color. I would prefer it to be the green to be more prominent. So I'm going to reserve the front face of a tank to be mostly green and black here, with the brown a little bit off to the sides, just to keep the balance. If you're looking at it full frontally, you get a bit of all 3 colors. Now our Leclerc is looking pretty damn dapper, so I'm going to assemble it and we'll see how that looks. Now this doesn't look too bad, but it is doing something silly here, and there are still a few more things we can do to improve its look, especially with regards to the tracks. So first of all, we're just going to stiffen this up, and while we're here, we're also going to wrench every other road wheel to reduce the number. So we have 6 here now. That is a more reasonable number. And we're also going to grab a suspension controller and a creative motor, and we will drop this down. And what I'm doing here is measuring how tall it is. In order to drive over one block, the bottom clearance of the tank only needs to be one block off the ground, of course. So I'm just having this here to measure how tall the front of the tank is. Now that it's looking a lot better, but even still, I would say the turret is actually a little bit too low. And there are ways to fix this just as it is now by leaving a little gap here. But for some of these builds, that's simply not possible, such as these bytes. You can't just move the bytes up like 2 pixels or whatever you want. And so that is the problem that the drop-in attempts to solve, and solve it does. The idea of a drop-in is that instead of having your hull and then placing your turret directly onto it, you can instead have a separate piece that sits on or in the hull, and then you attach your turret to that. So what this allows you to do is you can elevate this piece off the hull. You can lower it, relatively speaking. You can have it misaligned in any direction, including between 2 blocks if you have an even number center. So for example, that T-34 we looked at with a 6-block center, what you can do is have the bridge, as I like to call it, in the middle, and just have it held in place by slabs like this. And now you have your turret centered on 2 blocks. Probably the most popular use case, though, is just to elevate the whole turret upwards a little bit. So here, 4 out of 16. So for example, if your tank, if the hull is a little taller than just 1 block, and you have it like this, were it not for the drop-in, your barrel would, let me actually lock this here, would be too low. It would either be touching or even clipping through the top of your hull. But when you have a drop-in, like so, you can have it be actually aligned to the top of your hull, although it is misaligned with the block grid of the hull. So let me show you what that looks like on the Merkava here, the Mark II-D, which utilizes a drop-in to not only offset the turret forward or backwards by a slab, but also upwards by 4/16. So we have this cavity here, as you just saw, and then we have our bridge, which is shaped to the shape of this. So it has kind of T-shape with a T-shape here. So all you do is you take this and you drop it literally into your cavity. If I can do this, let's see here. Like so. And then you'll also want to lock it in. So to make sure it doesn't wiggle back and forth, we just have slabs on the other side. So you can see it does not move back and forth. It can still move up and down though. So to lock it in, you just want to use more blocks, except you can see it's clipping because this thing is elevated already by 4 out of 16th. So in order to do that, we need a little bit less than a block on top. So we have a 12 out of 16 because 12 plus 4 equals 16 out of 16. That is a full block. So combined, our 4 out of 16 full block 12 allows us to fit into a 2-block space. So we can lock it down like this, and now this thing is not going anywhere. We can even pick up the entire hull just by holding the bridge. And you can see here what this actually does for us. So if I paste the turret on, you can see that the turret is actually not aligned with the grid of the hull. So the gun is elevated a bit, and also it is not aligned this way either. There's a nice gap here. Now, things to note about the drop-in. They can be finicky in setup and moving around, especially if you don't do it right, you don't lock everything down correctly. Your turret can wobble side to side. It can even fall out if you do it really poorly. So there are things to look out for. And also it does create a bit more lag, so I've tried to avoid them as much as possible with my recent tanks. The drop-in is a great tool for making good looking tanks, but it is not the silver bullet for you to just abuse. One more use of the drop-in, and maybe even my favorite, is the Stridsvang 103. So we have the drop-in cavity here, and then we have this gun, which is actually sideways. You can see that the blocks are on their side here. It should be like this, kind of. like that. But we're going to be dropping this into the Stridsvong sideways, and that is so we can have our autoloader in this very compact shape, have the cannon mount down here. Everything fits much better. And it is pretty much seamless. Once it is fully locked down, it is just not going to come out. So to sum up, in order to make a realistic looking tank, first find some good reference images, break them up into shapes that you can actually recreate, and then do so to the best of your ability. That is probably the most important thing, I would say, is the planning part. A lot of people would just go in willy-nilly and try to recreate it just by looking. But if you have no plan, then it's just not going to work as well. Also, if need be, utilize the drop-in. It is a great tool, and I would highly recommend it. Just don't overuse it or abuse it, because it does have problems of its own. I really hope you found this tutorial useful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.